Welcome to the deep dive. Our mission today is to give you a shortcut to understanding a stack of sources that present a truly difficult yet really revolutionary framework.
Is. Yeah.
We are diving deep into material from association #IWARAs, which proposes this complete strategic overhaul of how we fight child sexual abuse.
Right. And the tool they want to use is cybersecurity.
Exactly. Using the established, cooperative, and incredibly rigorous strategies of cybersecurity defense as the absolute blueprint.
And it does sound like a really unlikely, maybe even a jarring parallel at first. I think most people would react that way.
I did.
But the sources, they really force you to look past that surface emotion and analyze the structure of the threat itself.
Okay.
What they argue is that in both major cyber attacks and the systemic abuse of children, we are dealing with coordinated, resource-rich, and intentional human origin threats.
And this is where the sources start with a pretty hard truth. They point out that society and authorities in both of these areas lost critical time.
Years, decades maybe.
Decades. By failing to clearly define and treat the threat for what it is, a structured, intentional attack on vital infrastructure.
Precisely. The sources note that we treated digital threats as these isolated incidents for so long until the scale just became impossible to ignore.
Right.
We're now in a place where resources have been applied effectively to the cyber threat, and that's resulted in standardized international defense protocols.
And that successful strategy is the engine this new framework is trying to borrow.
That's the blueprint.
So our mission is clear. We're moving past just the high-level comparison. We need to analyze the specific structural, psychological, and defensive parallels they're proposing.
And this is the goal, moving from what they call a digital risk management system to a perpetrator risk management system.
It's all about focusing on the mechanism of the attack, not just the outcome.
And critically, we have to accept the source's core premise for this to work, which is that the defense of a child's neurodevelopment isn't just a social welfare concern.
No.
It's a matter of vital strategic infrastructure defense. It requires the gravity and the rigor that we apply to national security.
Okay, let's unpack this with the core analogy they use, the hacker. Because the source defines a hacker in a very specific, functional way.
Right. It's not just a bad guy. It's a very clean definition. A hacker is someone who uses a tool for purposes that were not intended by its designer.
Okay, so in the digital context, that's like exploiting a code vulnerability to, insert yourself between a user and a website to capture their info.
Exactly. You're misusing the system's own design against it.
And when you apply that same functional definition to the perpetrator, the aggressor, the analogy, it just suddenly becomes razor sharp.
It really does. The source defines the perpetrator as someone who uses children as a tool for their own sexual and psychological ends.
Look at the examples they draw on. The cyber attacker exploits a technical vulnerability, a software glitch, something like that.
While the perpetrator exploits a human vulnerability, a child's trust, a parent's momentary inattention, a system that just doesn't have protective controls.
It's all about gaining proximity, whether that's digital or physical.
Exactly.
And what's the consequence of this misuse? In the IT world, the whole digital system gets transformed, data is corrupted, infrastructure collapses.
And in the human context, it's the child's neurodevelopment that is transformed. The systems of trust, of attachment, of emotional regulation. The core operating architecture of that developing mind.
It's attacked.
It's attacked. And it's reprogrammed by the trauma.
Right.
And that, the sources insist, is why the defense of neurodevelopment has to be treated like the defense of vital infrastructure.
The stakes just couldn't be higher.
Right.
This framing, it feels like a necessary, if chilling way to actually mobilize resources. It stops treating the outcome as just a tragedy and starts treating it as a systemic operational failure that, we can mitigate.
It forces us to ask a really tough question. If we wouldn't tolerate a massive vulnerability in our national power grid, why on earth do we tolerate major, preventable, structural vulnerabilities in the systems that are supposed to protect our children's development?
Here's where it gets, I think, really interesting. We're moving from the mechanism of the attack to the body's own defensive response post-trauma.
And the sources find this astonishing similarity between the psychological protection mechanisms of complex trauma and the architecture of, really complex IT security.
So this gets us to the concepts of compartmentalization and encryption.
Exactly. A complex traumatic structure in a child, the sources argue, is analogous to the protection mechanisms we intentionally build in to our most high-value IT systems.
Let's elaborate on that compartmentalization analogy
Yeah.
because it's powerful. Think of a major corporate network. You don't put everything on one big flat server.
No, absolutely not. You use firewalls and segmentation to separate everything.
So if an attacker gets into the HR database, they shouldn't immediately be able to contaminate the financial system or, say, the research lab.
Right. And that rigidity between emotional parts, which is a hallmark of a psycho-traumatized individual, where one part carries the memory and another part just tries to carry on with daily life.
It mirrors that.
It mirrors that intentional separation we build in IT. It's a defense mechanism. It's designed so that if the immediate zone of the psyche is overwhelmed, the entire system doesn't just crash.
It's protection through separation, built right into the brain's own defense
A
response.
kind of defensive genius, really, but it's still fundamentally reactive.
Yeah.
And it's costly.
And the second parallel is encryption.
Encryption, yeah.
Yeah.
Traumatic memory, the authors argue, is essentially encrypted. The information, the memory of the attack, all the details, it's all there. But it remains inaccessible or distorted until the person finds the psychological decryption code.
Which usually comes through safe, structured therapy.
Right. It's a shield against an overwhelming reality. It's locking away the data until the system is robust enough to actually handle processing it.
But both of these highly specialized defense systems, whether it's complex digital security or traumatic dissociation, they come with a massive shared drawback.
Inefficiency.
Inefficiency. They're enormously costly in terms of systemic resources.
They really are. The sources describe traumatic dissociation as an incredibly energy-intensive protection. Holding those emotional parts separate, maintaining that internal wall, it just consumes enormous mental resources.
Just like a highly complex digital security system, if you run 5 layers of firewall and deep inspection protocols and mandatory encryption on every single packet,
Your whole system slows down.
your computing operations run less well, less quickly, and they consume significantly more time and energy. It's the systemic, ongoing cost of the attack, whether it's digital or psychological.
And that cost, that reduction in operating speed and capability is measurable in both spheres. And it just underscores why prevention and proactive defense rather than reactive treatment are so essential.
So if we've established the threat is organized and the resulting trauma is this costly, complex defense mechanism, the next logical step, if you're following the military and cyber blueprint, is to implement a structured, coordinated defense system.
One that's focused on the aggressor. We have to transition to managing the threat proactively. This is an intentional human origin threat, and it's one that has resources. Aggressor groups have locations. They have storage space for illicit material. They often have accomplices.
So this requires developing intelligence of the threat.
Exactly. And the cyber strategy offers a perfect model because it's not just localized, it's standardized, and it's cooperative across borders.
The source uses the example of naming specific, high-level, state-sponsored hacker groups like APT-27.
Right. APT-27 is a known, sophisticated cyber threat actor. So when intelligence reports discuss them, they describe their specific strategic scenarios, their tactics, their tools.
With granular detail.
Immense detail. And the sources suggest that associations working with victims could describe the modus operandi of aggressors anonymously with that same level of detail and standardization.
And this is what fundamentally shifts the focus. From a digital risk management system, a DRMS, to a perpetrator risk management system, or PRMS.
Instead of managing the risk to the digital asset, you manage the risk posed by the perpetrator to the child.
It changes everything. It means the system has to be designed from the ground up to collect evidence systematically.
And the source is very, very pointed about this, referencing 2022 standards. They demand that digital tools must be used systematically to collect digital evidence.
For both. For IT intrusions and child aggressions.
Across the open web, the dark web, connected objects. If the evidence exists, it must be harvested and it must be analyzed as part of the PRMS.
But to realize this PRMS, the sources identify a number of, serious structural and legal roadblocks that are currently blocking an effective defense.
Let's start with information sharing. The source specifically calls out the need to legally unlock the sharing of anonymous information on aggressors' modus operandi.
And they highlight that this information often exists, even from victims whose cases are prescribed, meaning they can't lead a prosecution.
But legal barriers prevent it from being shared anonymously for intelligence purposes. It's just siloed.
And that is a crucial defense gap. If you can't correlate data on how these crimes are committed, you can't develop effective counter strategies.
It's like fighting a virus without knowing its strain or how it spreads.
And that ties directly into public awareness, which is maybe the most confrontational point the sources make. They insist on removing this veil of denial.
This is a tough one.
It is. The source demands we must legally unblock the impediment to reading aggressors' grooming guides and viewing the videos they produce, even in settings like municipal information sessions.
The population, they argue, must know the reality of the threat to understand how to build a defense against it.
It's a highly uncomfortable, but strategically, a vital demand. You can't design a secure system if you deny the existence or the capability of your opponent.
If we're really treating this with the seriousness of military or cyber defense, then intelligence about the enemy's methods is paramount.
The defense system itself also has to be multi-layered. The source recommends using perpetrator risk analysis methods at multiple scales.
Right, so at the level of the individual child, the family unit, the school, the municipality, the whole department.
It has to be a network defense that prevents vulnerabilities at every single level.
And to make that network function, correlation is key. Just as computer attacks are correlated by company or by sector, the source demands the systematic correlation of cases by city or by village.
And this would utilize the massive amounts of data collected by organizations like CI, that's the Independent Commission in France, looking into child sexual violence, to identify patterns and organized activity.
But to successfully implement this level of systemic change, shifting the focus, implementing a PRMS, managing data correlation, you need new expertise.
Expertise that just doesn't traditionally exist in social services or even in policing.
Absolutely not. The source mandates introducing new experts, specialists in implementing secure systems, high-level risk analysis, protection against malevolence, and the establishment of what they call highly reliable organizations.
They're looking for system architects, not just caseworkers.
Exactly. And this structural shift requires developing entirely new trans-organizational work processes. This is not just a policy memo.
No, this is a complete rebuild of how different agencies, judicial, medical, educational, protective services, how they communicate and operate.
Which brings us to the final, really powerful conclusion from the source. To successfully fight this threat, which covers pedocriminality, abuse against older children, and nipiocriminality, which specifically covers violence and abuse against children aged 0 to 5.
To fight all of that requires programming that is as solid as military programming.
And that's the ultimate strategic marker. Treating the defense of a child's development with the same operational commitment and resource allocation as, say, national defense or war planning.
It demands an overhaul that goes way beyond just funding. It requires structuring entirely new processes.
Things involving strict confidentiality protocols, defining a clear chain of responsibilities, and, critically, creating secure circles of reliability for information sharing.
While at the same time protecting whistleblowers who come forward with critical intelligence.
It's a huge undertaking.
So what does this all mean for you, the listener? We've really transformed the problem from a diffuse, overwhelming social tragedy into a managed, measurable system, the PRMS.
A system inspired by the world's most successful defensive architecture.
And the PRMS goal, as the source dictates, is continuous improvement. Its results must be continuously measured and published.
But the lingering thought here, I think, given the absolute necessity of structuring new processes and involving so many different stakeholders, is this. If we agree this requires military-grade strategic thinking and programming, how fundamentally must society shift its priorities and its laws?
How do you treat neurodevelopmental defense with the same strategic focus and resource commitment that we dedicate to the next generation fighter jet or the maintenance of our financial infrastructure?
That's the strategic challenge. What are you willing to fund, and what structural complacency are you willing to challenge when the vital infrastructure is a child's mind?
That's your deep dive for today.